We're so disconnected. I love it. I am a hearty Solomon Island in everything I do. I just can't help it. Instead of putting all these expectations on our women, we should be teaching our sons as well. Just giving yourself that permission to fail. It eliminates a little bit of the nerves.
Welcome to an amazing episode here on Dear Suga, the podcast that amplifies Pasifika women's voices through storytelling, culture, and conversation. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is a great time. Every episode is a conversation worth staying for. Today's episode is one I have genuinely been looking forward to. I have the honor of welcoming my first Melanesian guest. I was blown away watching her monologue at the Miss Pacific Island pageant because she was advocating for women, all about taming the chaos, which I absolutely love. And I was like, I got to find this girl and I follow her. She's got a lot going on. So with every guest, I like to give the chance for people to get to know you. So who is Elsie Polosovai?
Thank you for sharing how you felt about that monologue. It was a very personal piece to me, so I'm glad that that impact was felt. Thank you for having me here on Dear Suga. I'm really excited to have this chat. We call it Tok Stori. I know you guys call it Talanoa. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Elsie Polosovai. I come from Malaita and Choiseul province in the Solomon Islands. I currently reside here in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland, New Zealand, but my roots grounded and rooted in the Solomon Islands. I am a hearty Solomon Island in everything I do. I get a bit conscious about it sometimes, but I just can't help it.
For the woman that's listening into our conversation, what are you hoping they can walk away with?
I would love them to not remember Solomon Islands as a forgotten little corner of the Pacific, but rather a group of islands with stories, languages, creativity, and my favorite one is resilience, because it's a place where a lot of our history is remembered, and Solomon Islands has a touch of history from each part of the world. I like to think of it as a little time capsule where a lot of our home and our stories originate from, and it really does shape how we see ourselves in the wider world. We are very much a Pacific in a capsule. We have Melanesians, Micronesians, and Polynesians within Solomon Islands itself. There are 9 main provinces, but there are a range of different groups of races and people who have come from across the Pacific to settle in that we call our Happy Isles. That's what we're known for. Quite a small, not so marketed, not very romanticized Pacific country, but I think there's power in that itself, in being so close, I'll say, together with each other, despite our vast differences in race.
So a majority of my audience, they're Polynesian or US based. And so I think we're going to do a lot of things that I think were misconceptions or what I thought before and now, how people are labeled as Polynesian, Melanesian, Micronesian. The way I had learned was like Polynesian is like many islands. And then I said, oh, so I guess Micronesia and Melanesia, there's not that many islands. But you just said Solomon Islands is small, but compared to Samoa, it is bigger. The land mass. When you're talking, you're from Choiseul, Lauru, right? Lauru and Malaita. The island is bigger than in a comparison to Upolu, Samoa. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think we're so used to saying we're small, but in terms of how many of us leave our country and spread across the world, I guess that feels small. And having labels, like you say, Melanesians, Micronesians, and Polynesians, those terms, to me, I believe they can be useful, like geographically, of course, because the problem is we can accidentally flatten people into categories, and I always come across it when I talk about Melanesia, because I'm always representing Melanesia hard out. And I don't say I have a strong standing in whether I believe it's good for us or not. Give it the power that it needs and what I can give to it.
Yeah, like you said, when we look at just those words itself, it then flattens us into categories when we are so much more than that. I don't even think a lot of people from the US knows the Solomon Islands. They only know Guadalcanal, but that they probably don't even know where it's located. So it's interesting too, because just recently I saw a documentary that's coming out. We always tend to think that the war was behind us. I don't know if you're involved in that project, or maybe give us a glimpse into Guadalcanal and World War II in the Solomon Islands.
For a lot of people who only know Solomon Islands through Guadalcanal in World War II. I'd say imagine being known internationally for something that happened way before my time and even my grandparents were born. That's often how it feels. The war, as much as it mattered and its impact, is very much still felt and is a part of our history. Today, Solomon Islands is a young and a vibrant nation on its own, and we have our own ambitions and our voices. We are still navigating a lot of modern challenges like climate change on top of the remnants of the war, which I know the documentary goes into. I personally am not involved in the documentary or the production, but one of my aunties was a victim of that specific event that influenced the production of that whole documentary, which is quite powerful, I say. The remnants of that war is still very much active today in the Solomon Islands. We still have these bombs that we find in someone's backyard when they didn't even know they were living with it. It's a quite powerful documentary, and I really do look forward to it being screened here in New Zealand.
I really want to look into this documentary once it comes out. So, okay, I wanted to start the conversation to say hello in Babatana because I heard that's your native language. But
Yay.
unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. So, do you mind if maybe you could teach us to say hello in Babatana?
Of course, Babatana is one of the main languages of Lauru, Chozo province. It's my first language that I learned. I was born in the Western province, but my childhood started in Chozo. I spent a lot of time with my grandma, who was a very strict Lauru woman who enforced me speaking the language, and I wasn't allowed to speak Pidgin, so I learned Pidgin later. There isn't much written material yet online. My mum is kind of working in that space at the moment
Oh,
to
nice.
make resources. The way we say hello, I don't think we really have a word for hello. It's usually bekosere.
Bekosere.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we tend to ask about, where have you been or where have you come from? It's quite interesting because I go through 3 different languages in my head. I'll sometimes think in Babatana or Pidgin and English all at the same time. That's quite a lot happening in here at once. We do have the word for thank you, which is sanai.
Sanai. Sanai.
Sanai. Yeah, 100%. Mum is very much involved in the language space. That's her passion, coming up with resources. And she does have a Facebook page. We'll go there, where she teaches languages in
Well,
Babatana. Yes.
you should definitely send it to me so then I can also look into it and learn
I'll
it.
see.
I was trying to find as much as I can about Chusol and realizing that Chusol is actually French, a Frenchman.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is a
Uh,
Frenchman. The Solomon Islands was discovered by a Spanish explorer, Alvaro de Mendana, who thought King Solomon from the Bible had found his gold in the Solomons. Because when he discovered Solomons, we had a lot of gold at the time. We still do to this day, but that's what sort of was known for. A lot of influences from the French and the Spanish explorers. Our island names, like you said, French for Chozo, but the indigenous name is Lauru.
So before you became Miss Solomon Islands, you were Miss Lauru. Your mom's side is from Chusol. Your dad is also from Chusol and Malaita. So what did that mean for you to take on that representation?
It's a very proud moment for me. I didn't spend that much time in Choiseul with my people because we moved away when I was quite young. I still carry our language with me, which is my pride, I'll say, and my connection to my homeland. It was a very interesting moment and time of my life as a young adult, and reconnecting with a lot of people, a lot of groups that have the same experiences and same perspectives as I did, even though we lived way far apart. I grew up in a way different place from them. Carrying the title of Miss Lauru made me realize how connected we are in terms of bloodline and from where our ancestors came from. So it's quite a strong moment for me. I learned a lot about myself and about my people in that time.
That's super awesome. I was just looking at how about the Solomon Islands, there's about 80 plus languages that's spoken throughout. I'm trying to understand a little bit because within Samoa, we all speak Samoan. And so it's easy to communicate within Chusol. Just within this space and areas, is it even though there's different languages, are there things that you can easily pick out that's very similar to the language that you know? Or is it totally different?
It's called dialect in Choiseul. They're more than just words that are pronounced in a different rhythm. They can be totally different altogether. I'll give you an example. In Babatana, we say Marisasanai for good morning. Then another language in Choiseul will say Sarakuvelaka. So they sound totally different. The dialects can have just a different ring to it or different tone to it, but we have very distinct, I say, languages, which makes it a little bit hard sometimes to explain to someone why we speak pidgin, because pidgin comes in as a connector for everyone. You say, why can't you just speak in your language? You're both from Choiseul, but they can be from different sides of Choiseul.
That's why I wanted to make that distinction so that people can see how big like Lauru itself is. There's a lot that we can talk about and pivot to. When you mentioned having born and raised in the Solomon Islands and then you moved to New Zealand, we were talking about resilience. And I'm curious as to what was something that you were brought up with that helped you cope a lot with the move to New Zealand?
That's a really good question. I think about that transition quite a lot. I was 11 or 12 at the time we left Solomons. Before that, we did move to Fiji for a couple of years, and then we moved back, and then we came here. I did struggle getting here the first time we got here. I was always worried that I wouldn't ever feel like I belong here, ever feel like I can make friends here. But I think one thing I took with me is it's not going to be a challenge forever. It's going to be an unfamiliar place to be in for a while, but I tried to get comfortable with bringing myself there. And if I'm not there to fit into this whole country that's already there, I can be here and still be myself. I was lucky enough, like I spoke about before, my language as a really strong anchor for myself and knowing who I am. And so whatever opportunity I got to share where I'm from in high school and in intermediate, they would assume the only other continent in the world where they've seen people like me, and they'd ask me, are you from Africa? And I said, no. And then I used to get offended by that at the start, but then I started to take those opportunities as a time to educate people if they care or not. But I'd tell them about the Solomon Islands, and over time it became this cool thing, like, hey, this girl's from the Solomon Islands, have you heard of that before? And it's like, no, we haven't. And then there will be a nice conversation starter. Yeah, that's sort of how it started for me.
I love that you took what was very unique about you to actually socialize and make friends. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that you said that because, so please forgive me if I'm being ignorant about some of these things. When I look into YouTube, there's a big fascination over it. Solomon Islands with blonde hair, which is super awesome because the thing that's actually interesting is they did like a gene test and there's like, it's very distinct just to the Solomon Islands.
Yeah. I didn't realize how, I guess, unique, but also a little bit over glorified that feature is until I moved here. And at the start, it was like a cool thing that I'd mention, like, hey, we also have blonde haired people in the Solomon Islands, as anyone would be about a unique fact. Now, I was proud of it. I would tell people about it. And I think over time, looking back at how much attention that got, I started to question it a little bit. Why are we so fixated on this one feature? As much as it makes us very unique, we need to be very careful about how we're selling it to people. And yet it's true, it's quite a unique feature to Solomon Islands, and we also have it in Vanuatu. There's also some Fijians as well that will have that blonde hair feature. Yeah, I've been seeing it a lot as well with YouTubers, like you said. There was a video recently with a traveler asking about this blonde-haired child who she was carrying, and I feel like the way that she asked those questions was putting words into this other person's mouth. And then I thought to myself, this is how people tell our stories when we don't tell them ourselves. As much as it's a really unique feature, we need to protect that as well about ourselves, because there's more that we have to offer than these features that very glorified, which now thinking back, I believe it's closely tied to colonial beauty standards and beauty features, and in that lens to pull in travelers and market the Solomon Islands, which can be a good thing, but also can be quite damaging if we don't protect it or take ownership of our stories.
I listened to a podcast that you were part of, and you were talking about colorism. So, being half Korean, half Samoan, people will look at me and go, "Oh, you're very tan." And so I grew up like, "Oh my gosh, I have to be more lighter and be this and not learn to appreciate who I was." This is my mind having to reverse how I think of myself and appreciative of every skin color. I'm not going to say I'm colorblind because that's ever true. I don't know what it was like when you were growing up, but I wanted to share with you because I feel like it's a real thing. So, how did you navigate colorism?
I didn't understand the concept of colorism until I moved here. And recent events that I've been a part of, I have always seen it in my society, but just didn't really have the words for it. I guess what defined what it was to me at the time. I think at the end of the day, to me, it's something many of us didn't choose. We can choose to unlearn these ideas. And I always advocate about this starting awareness. If we start questioning, where did we learn this idea from? Who taught us this? Or what standards do we put ourselves to, and what standards do we accept? And also the languages that we use every day, that can really help to navigate the whole world, and the war of colorism, if we're not careful, can be a very big part of how you see yourself in the world and your confidence at the end of the day. So I've always seen colorism growing up in my community, not just in the wider Pacific communities that I have grown up in, but also within my own community as well.
I think it's interesting that you said that. I love your monologue. I keep going back to it. You talked about your hair, singed the iron, but I loved how you were like, I'm also a woman of science. And then you went and did your experiment, and then just, I can't remember the exact words that it's almost like you dare to dream. I thought, oh my gosh, she is an amazing woman with a science background. And then I learned after you were an actress. You're just a fascinating person. I'm like, damn, this girl, like, she's doing both. What got you interested in science?
From a very young age, I wanted to do everything. And as soon as I felt like I was good at something, I'm like, I can do something about this. So I've always been very curious. I live in my head a lot because I notice that I'll think about something and then I'll think about the way I'm thinking about it. And it just goes deeper than that. So I think that's what brought me to science. I enjoyed chemistry in high school. I enjoyed doing arts as well at the same time. I was in photography, painting, but at the same time, I was very interested in science because it helped me think outside and really work my brain up. So I went off to uni to study chemistry and nutrition, graduated with a Bachelor of Science and Human Nutrition, which was a really interesting degree because I was in spaces where I was most of the time the only Pacific person and the only Melanesian Solomon Islander in that space. I found it quite daunting for myself, but then I'd also think about, oh, but I have a background in acting and I usually just fake my way through these group projects, presentations. So I kind of just, I guess, found a way to make both of these two things that I enjoyed work for me. I'm still very much involved in the creative art space, but I also have that curiosity and enjoyment for STEM and science.
It's fascinating because I know you're doing both. And I'm like, how does she do all of this at the same time? But you know what? Good for you. More power to you for doing it. I'm so curious. What is the difference between nutrition and then there's human nutrition? I don't know. Is it the same thing or is it different?
Yeah, it's definitely the same thing. I guess calling it human nutrition mainly because our study and our researches were based on human being, us, from conception till adolescent and then late stages of life. I got into it because the idea of food and like no matter what we do, we have to eat. That sort of drew me to the degree to start, and a lot of practical work that we did with that degree. We got to talk to people, and that's one of my favorite things to do is talking and working for people. But there's also a whole nother world in nutrition where the metabolism comes with genetics. So it's just, yeah, a whole different world there. And I think that's one of the first things that I kind of drew from as well, learning when I went into nutrition. My grandma, she had type 1 diabetes, and from that experience, food was such a scary topic in the household because everyone's like, don't eat too much sweets, you're going to end up like grandma. And then it just became a really scary conversation, which was why I sort of dipped my foot into there. I was like, what's so scary about this? Let's talk about food. Let's study food. And that's sort of how I went into nutrition. And I really enjoyed the degree as well. I'm currently not working in that space, but grateful for that learning and for having that experience and gathering those knowledges in that space, which I know will be useful.
So I'm curious about the platform you were in as Miss Solomon Islands. Why did you decide to choose your platform around women's health?
I was working at the lab at the time I joined the pageant, and a lot of the patients that we work with have their samples sent out from rural parts of New Zealand. And then it just made me think, imagine how much more rural my grandmother's living right now. My dad's mum, who is the only one of my grandparents who is alive right now, but she lives quite rural in the Solomon Islands. And then I was thinking about accessibility and how we don't have that same sort of accessibility as a lot of women and elders here. And that sort of drew me to women's health and opening up the conversation in a space that is so taboo. Like our cultures will stop us from talking openly about menstruation, reproductive health, and all these taboo topics lead to a lot more serious outcomes like domestic violence and more serious health issues. So I thought, what if we just focus on sort of one aspect of women, which is women's health, which is something that I think everyone at some point will either have an experience with or have already had experiences with in their family. And that's what led me to advocating for women's health at the time.
I'm curious, going in, wanting to connect with women about women's health. And so that experience, getting to meet a lot of the women in the Solomon Islands, I was curious to know what you were planning to go in versus what came out of having those conversations one on one.
Yes, I think going back home and having that drive to advocate for women's health, the back of my mind, it was quite a very fulfilling experience. I got to meet a lot of women in spaces that protect our domestic violence victims, and a lot of our nurses and doctors in hospital who are working in the gynae ward, neonatal, and I got to visit the hospital as well in the Solomons, which was quite a special experience for me. And I held every one of those people that I visited very close to my heart, and took the time to sit down and have a chat with them. We made time to sit down with some of the children at the children's ward as well. And during my Miss Lauru journey, we got to donate some pads and some sanitary items for the ward at the National Hospital. It wasn't a very big space and we couldn't donate enough to everyone, but at least it held some of the women, maybe blessed them for the next week or so, that's more than happy about doing what you can do.
You know, that's actually something, if I ever have the opportunity to keep growing Dear Suga, is to grow in that space, because there are just some things that were very taboo that we couldn't really talk about. Like, I'm so grateful that I got to learn it through 17 magazine and Allure. That hopefully doesn't give you my age away. But, in terms of tampons, pads, like understanding your cycle and even sex education, which I feel is very important. But in the Solomon Islands, I'm curious how you can have that conversation without overstepping, to be like, who
Yes.
are you to come in and make us feel like a Western society?
That was so true. I had to consider that a lot when we did our visits to places where I would talk about my advocacy. There was a women's event where I mentioned, instead of putting all these expectations on our women, we should be teaching our sons as well, teaching our sons the way to speak to a woman and the way to respect their women. There was a lot of spaces where not struggle, but try to make my advocacy point not so I'm telling us to just, go against some of our cultural norms and our cultural traditions. Yeah, definitely did break a lot of, what's the word for it? I wouldn't say custom, but traditions, I guess, talking about
Social norms.
Women's health, social norms, and talking about women's health, I remember one of my visits to the National University, and we were all asked to talk about our advocacy, and I spoke about women's health as my advocacy, and the crowd was mainly boys who were around our age, and so they got the opportunity to ask questions, and one of them asked, like, why do we need to know about women's health? Why are you talking about women's health to us here? And I told him, because one day, maybe not now, you will marry a woman if that's what you prefer, and you will have to listen to her when she tells you she has a cycle. And the reaction from that was actually surprised me, because they were all so excited, but also not in a way that I expected them to be. I think they were more so just hyped
being
up for the
cheeky.
fact. A little bit cheeky. It was hard. So yeah, we do have quite a long way to go in terms of pushing for that. But in whatever small way we can, I try to make it normal for my little sister. I try to talk to her, make her feel welcome, open up to talk to me, just so we're not making everything too taboo that we suffer from that.
Yeah. I think even just learning how to dispose it correctly is so
Yeah.
important, and to normalize it instead of having to be so taboo that we don't learn about our own body. And so I love that you talked about that. So you're not in STEM. Are you taking on more career in acting?
Yeah, that's sort of where it's heading. I have recently just moved to a new job. I was previously working in the emergency services with the ambulance service, but I'm finding that my direction and passions feel more stronger of a calling. So allowing myself to have more of that time to invest in my creative and arts career path.
I love that for you. And you're still exploring, and I think that's great. I'm in my 40s and I'm still exploring.
Of course, it doesn't end. I don't think I'll ever come to what I want to do forever. I want to do everything all at the same time.
I feel like it's good to follow what your passions are and what you're doing. One of the things that I loved about you too, I guess we're always going back to the pageants, but it's not just pageants, just the way you present yourself. You're great at composing yourself and impromptu conversations like we do right now. And so I have a feeling it has a lot to do with acting. Personally, I would love to take an acting class because my face will tell how I'm feeling about things. But how has that acting space helped you? You know, standing up, advocating. I'm thinking of these kids who are just probably trying to be funny, but I could see yourself handling it well. I feel like it has to do a lot with acting, learning to be right. It's okay. I don't know
Yeah.
where I'm going with that, but I can see it.
No, 100%. Oh, I love talking about acting. It's still something that I kind of disconnect myself to a lot. I'm very hesitant to introduce myself. I'm also an actress. I'm also a performer. But a great deal of my experiences and I guess very first sort of exposure to public speaking was through acting and speaking in front of a crowd. My very first public audience was my congregation at church in the Solomon Islands. I was picked randomly by one of the Sunday school teachers to read the Bible verse for Children's Day, where the kids lead the Sunday service.
Yes.
And I got to read 4 verses of the Bible, and I was very excited for that. I practiced all night. I basically memorized it, and I said, "Can I just say it by word?" And they're like, "No, you have to take the Bible with you and read it." Which I wanted to just, I wanted to just say it, to perform it. But that was my first one. And then after that, we did some Sunday school skits. I think I was a very extroverted little kid as well. So kind of people feel comfortable throwing me into things and I would take it very well. So I'd do some Sunday school skits, and then moving here to New Zealand, I did a speech in year 9 about cultural interaction. But then the drama teacher approached me and he's like, "Have you heard of drama before? Do you know it's a thing?" I was like, "No, I haven't, but sounds good." So then I joined the drama class, and then everything else kind of just snowballed from that point. And then I ended up training in physical theatre, which is a really niche, I guess, method of acting and of theatre. It tells stories with movement and with spontaneity. That's a very important part of acting, and just being able to connect with another person as well. I'll say a lot of my confidence does come from having that experience and being on stage and being watched. I hope that answers it.
Yes. Well, I'm a total introvert. So I feel like there's days where I could just put up a front and just be like, okay, this is it. But the majority of the time, I'm like, okay, leave me alone. Rest. But I'm so anxious when I get on a stage. And so I'm curious, what's something that you've done that helps you kind of settle into the role? Or
Yeah, for stage and for any performance. I also did this at the pageantry as well. I don't speak to anyone before I go on stage. I would either listen to some rain sounds or forest ambience sounds. I like to go into it with a very clear mind and just being able to establish that trust with myself, because when I'm up there, I'm not relying on anyone else. It's all going to be from here. So I guess a little ritual to really build that trust with myself, and knowing that I'll be going up there, knowing that I'm really connected to myself and what I have to offer. I will probably say I'll say a prayer before I go on stage. I also try to remind myself is that I will make a mistake. I will probably say the wrong line, but just giving yourself that permission to fail already eliminates a little bit of the nerves.
That's good to know. I've seen you in Hiama and you were so amazing. The way you had moved, it was almost a dance itself. So I'm curious where you got that inspiration from.
That dance-like movement piece was all credit to Julia. She is an amazing dance teacher and also does Melanesian marking, but she's a Pacific dance teacher. So we worked together making those movements. The idea was earthquake and sort of centipede, the whole theme of Hiama that you would probably see in the very end. The movements drew from that. So it went from earthquake to centipede. And then she's like, yeah, just do that thing. And then I think we were just playing around. And then she got chills when I was doing that last movement. And then we showed the director and Matasila loved it. So I guess that's where it came from. It came from play, really. A lot of performing and a lot of work does come from just allowing yourself to play and see what comes up. I'm sure you'll know that with dance as well. Dance is quite liberating, and that's literally what it was. It was just a dance, a piece.
That's awesome. I'm not a professional dancer. I just like to dance. Honestly.
No,
but Hiama is like one of your earliest works, and you've done a lot since then. So, what piece have you really felt like you connected with, and why that is?
I would say there was a little emerging artist show that we did with the theatre company I was training with 6 years ago now. And that play was, it's called Te Whare Kapua. It's The Cloud House. It's written by a Māori writer and artist. And that was a play set in one of the bush ranges here in New Zealand. It didn't really have a storyline. It was more of these 5 individuals who were figuring out themselves. The theatre company that we worked with, they have a very niche way of performing where they place a big emphasis on complicity and how people connect, and that connection being the performance. So there was a lot of playing, but a lot of experimenting with sounds, movement. We got to dance a lot, which was fun. And you can rehearse dance, but there were some bits where it was like freestyle, do your own thing. And that was my favorite part. It challenged me a lot because I played a twin. It's funny because me and the girl that played my other twin, she's Māori, and we looked very different. We did not, obviously did not look like twins at all. But in making those characters work, it gave me a whole new appreciation of how similar we are as people and about how closer we are than we think. The whole twin thing felt more like a metaphor, which was really strong. It definitely challenged my performing and my acting. We'd have a lot of moments where it had to be real and not performed, which was hard, but that piece has really stayed with me, I say, over the years. I've done a few theatre shows and screen stuff. I do have another one coming up, which I can't reveal too much yet about, and I got a little part to play, and that's part of a feature film. I really enjoyed that as well, and I'm really excited to start sharing it once all the promo stuff comes out, and got a couple of our little projects coming up this year, so quite exciting.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, I'm so excited for you. So it sounds like
thank
you're
you.
definitely heading that space. Would you ever see yourself going back home to the Solomon Islands, like put up your own production or teaching a class?
That has definitely crossed my mind at one point. I do think a lot about going back and making a production or theatre group or just teaching a lot of the skills that I've learned over the years. At this stage, I think I really need to build a really strong basket of resources. So when I take it back there, I can give them 100% and not just little bits of everything.
I think that's pretty cool. Even though you're in New Zealand, I see you still doing your best to help out. I think with Cyclone
Mm.
Malia, you were actually putting a few things together. I was curious as to how that project went and where it stands today.
Yeah, that was a really last minute project that just came out from looking at all the photos and what the impacts were back home. We managed to raise a good amount of funding and we sent it back home. So it's helping the South Choiseul constituency in buying bags of rice, clean water, and just other essentials that affected villages needed at the time. Also, when you do a last minute project like that, you really see people who have the heart and the belief in doing something small. They really show out, which is also a really humbling feeling. That was really beautiful, and I'm so grateful that I got to put something together, even though it was last minute. But we had a lot of support from our people.
That's wonderful. I just came across it when I was doing my research, which is super awesome. A lot of time people get the misconception that once a hurricane happens, the news
Mm,
is spotlight, everything is there. But people
mm.
don't realize that, once everything calms down, the world keeps revolving, but the people that actually live there still are trying to get through their life. We talked about climate change earlier, and there's been reports that come out that climate change somehow correlates to violence against women. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts to that.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna support that point you made. It definitely does have a correlation, as much as it might sound ridiculous to a lot of people. If just hearing about it at face value, there's so much more to it. Climate change, it will affect the way we do things. So we're forced, I guess, to change the way we, for example, collect water. And if we change the way we do things, the time we take to do them might change as well. And all these little changes can trigger unfamiliar behavior with women, which then triggers their partners and their families. And if without all these awareness and I guess literacy on climate change, a lot of our people don't have the Western literacy of climate change. We know climate change in our cultures and our land and our villages. I guess where I'm heading to here is that disconnect can be hard to communicate to our people, and therefore it's harder to give them awareness on how these two issues, although very separate, can be related to each other.
Yes. I know we're running out of time, but I think this is a great start of a conversation. There's a lot going on within the Pacific. I watched the One Talk podcast. As Pacific Islanders, we use music to lift our spirits, and this is where resilience come in. What made you want to start that conversation and maybe give us a little insight into what One Talk is for people who don't understand Melanesian music?
Yeah, of course. One talk came from involvement with Wan Fire Music was a music festival held in Fiji last year. I reached out to the organizers. I said, hey, I think this is really cool what you're doing with this music festival and bringing together a lot of our artists in the Pacific, having a strong focus on Melanesia, because I know a lot of Melanesian music is quite mainstream but underappreciated to say, but we have quite unique music sounds and very catchy music, I'll say, in Melanesia. I love music. I involved, and then I suggested I could do a podcast with the artists to show people they are human at the end of the day, and they are
Yes.
these people that we can probably relate to outside of their singing and the stories that they're telling. So that's where One Talk came from. We unfortunately didn't really have enough time, and with everyone being in different countries, it was quite hard to go through all of the artists. So we didn't manage to get through all of them. Wan Fire's PNG this year in June.
Yes, that's why I thought I wanted to bring it up. One of my close girlfriends, she's from the Caribbean, and so there's like, calypso, soca. And so I'm curious as to what would be Melanesian music that you would find in One Fire.
A lot of our music has very strong lyrics that are from our unique languages. In Melanesia, there's a lot of indigenous languages in that, and it's also the types of beats that they use are quite influenced by these traditional drums and traditional instruments that people used back in the days, and we're sort of putting that into our music now, which is helping us preserve our music for the future so we can share and push it out as long as we can. And I think a lot of our Melanesian music has exactly that essence. When you listen to it, you just feel like you're home, and it's just really liberating. And I will still play it now whenever I get the chance to connect to the car, or if I'm just playing it in my room. Carries more than just a good tune to listen to. It brings a lot of peace and sort of belonging, that feeling of belonging back.
I love that. So I'm curious as to what's the song that's on repeat for you
Oh,
lately?
oh my gosh.
Putting you
So
on the
many.
spot.
Oh gosh, I'm on the spot. Let me check through my Spotify. I don't think I have a particular music because I'll be circling through a lot of music. You talk about Caribbean music now. I open my playlist and it's all just dancehall music, which brings me back to when I was first in the Solomons and I found my cousin's SD card and it had all these Jamaican music and it
Yeah.
sounded so familiar to solo music. Ding, 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 ding. There it is. Let's talk about Melanesian music. This would be Liz Vamarasi Jisop.
Okay, I like
That's
that.
Liz. Liz performed at Wan Fire last year as well.
I do appreciate you because I was starting the podcast and you followed the journey. So I'm super appreciative for you supporting. And so I was like, if ever a person can come and represent, I really want it to be Elsie.
Throw my hand up.
So I appreciate you. I do feel like Melanesian women's voices are not well represented, and I want to hear more. I think I'm starting small with just my community, but I want to expand out more. So I'm super grateful for it. You've been so amazing. I appreciate you dearly.
If you enjoyed this conversation and you know someone who would enjoy this episode, I hope you'll share it with them. If something resonated with you, if something made you think, or if felt familiar, I hope you can leave a comment. Always open to constructive feedback and ways that I can continue to grow Dear Suga. I look forward to welcoming you in the next episode, so stay grounded, stay growing, stay connected with all my elephant mana. Soy fua ma ia manuia.